We're in conversation with Mohal Lalbhai, the founder and CEO of Matter, a future tech company that is in the electric mobility space. Now, Matter has just unveiled its era, electric bike packed with innovation and technology. And talking to me about it is Mohal. Mohal, firstly, congratulations. Era really a very unique kind of proposition. Firstly, an EV, well, you've got liquid cooling, but an EV with gears. You've got a 4-speed gearbox on this. I mean, you don't really associate that with an electric bike, quite honestly.
So first of all, thank you for having me here. And I think, well, jumping straight into it, I personally believe that a motorcycle has, or historically has always had some character. And there's always an emotion which is attached. There is a certain degree of control you get over a powertrain. And I think for us, there's a lot of engineering reasons why we wanted to introduce a gearbox. But I think the biggest one, and there are some reasons that your brain tells you why, and then there are some reasons your heart tells you why. And I think I'm going to start with those. That a motorcycle for me without a gearbox or control over the powertrain is just not a motorcycle. It's more like a glorified scooter. It's got the form factor, it's got everything, but it just does not feel live enough. I'm not able to explain that spark or that pulse that you have on the vehicle. But I think it's purely to do with emotion and the heart here, where you want it to still, a flick of a gear, you want it to really respond to you.
That's interesting. So basically what you're saying is, I think emotion has been something, quite honestly, that's been lacking in EVs, be it cars, be it bikes. And this is one way of bringing it back, making the rider a little bit more engaged in the whole riding process.
Yes, and I think EVs, I mean, I drive an EV and it's fantastic. I mean, 0 to top speed, it's linear, it's flat out. I get pushed way back into my seat. All of this happens, but does it have the character which was there of the cars before? I don't think so. And there are a lot of, because there is no audio feedback coming in from the car, there is no vibration coming in from the engine. A lot of things are missing when it comes to EVs. They're cleaner, they're quieter, it's fantastic. But the emotion, and there are many ways of getting that emotion.
That whole
back.
sensory feel.
Yeah, I mean, the gearbox, or be it in terms of information being made available, in terms of audio feedbacks, there's a lot that's happening. But I think, again, getting that character which is truly shifting up, shifting down, that's what we wanted to bring back. And that's why the gearbox comes in, purely from the emotional side. But from a logic side, I think, and you'll appreciate this way more than most, but to give the kind of torque we want to, and not having the gears, means we would have had to put a much larger motor. So to reach a top speed, I need speed, not torque. But to get acceleration, I need torque. I mean, I need low speed torque.
Yeah. So using the gearbox to, like a gearbox does, is amplify the torque.
Yes. So it's more than a speed regulator. It's really a torque regulator.
Right.
In the first
or a torque amplifier, to be
torque
honest.
amplifier. I mean, in the first gear, you get significant output in terms of torque, but you can only go up to 40 kilometers an hour. On top gear, I mean, in fourth gear, you get about moderate to low torque, but you're able to go all the way up to 105. And that is what is really allowing people to decide. I mean, you don't want that torque when you're at 80. All you want is enough acceleration to overtake somebody.
Right.
But when you're in the city, when you want to be in peak traffic and you want to really cut through the line and get ahead, you want that acceleration to really get you there quickly. So that's where, from a torque amplifier perspective, is why the gearbox really, really helps in not oversizing the powertrain.
Right.
And what most people don't realize is that if the motor is larger, the battery pack proportionately becomes larger. Think of it as a 2:1 ratio.
Right.
for every unit of power your motor has, the
Half
battery
of that.
has to be about at least half. And that is where I think if the motor becomes larger to meet the performance, the battery becomes larger, weight increases, cost increases, and it just does not make
But wouldn't you
sense.
say the gearbox also increases a bit of weight and complexity and cost as well?
Oh, it does. Oh, it does. It does. I mean, it's not that the gearbox is light. It's about 15 odd kilograms in all. But for those 15 kilograms, I think I'm saving on about two, 2.5 kilowatts of battery.
That's yeah.
The cost associated with that, the
Right.
cost of a larger motor, larger electronics, all the expensive stuff
Right.
doesn't need to get increased.
Got it. Got it.
It's metal which increases, and that's a fair trade-off that I think over the last 5 years we've tried multiple iterations of this to reach at this sweet spot.
Right.
That for this given motor, for this given gearbox, we are able to achieve. And I mean, if you get it done right, you will probably be doing a 0 to 60 in 5.1 seconds. So I think that's decent acceleration going through the gears that you're really getting from the bike.
And tell me, switching to, I mean, liquid cooling,
Yep.
again, something which is pretty, let's say you pack that in as well. Again, obviously the benefits of liquid cooling are there, especially in our ambient conditions.
Yep.
What made you go to that? Because a lot of people, don't go down that route. It's expensive. Let's say it adds to the cost, but clearly there's a big benefit as well.
So here's, I mean, there's a fantastic story in the background here. So we started in January of 2019, and we wanted to kind of make our first prototype somewhere around March 2020. And unfortunately, the pandemic hit, and everything went into a lock. So we actually were able to make our first prototype somewhere in June and July that year. Everyone had to open up, we got our parts in, and we made the first prototype. Exactly 15 days driving in, one fine summer, I mean, it was still summer in Ahmedabad in July, but one afternoon, one of the engineers wanted to take the bike out in the afternoon just to test something, and it refused to start. And everyone's wondering, it must be out of charge or something got loose. It's a prototype after all, it just doesn't make sense. And that's when eventually somebody pulled out a laptop, plugged it in to know what's going wrong, and they realized that battery is too hot.
Overheated. Yeah.
And that's when we realized that it was a typical use case. It was parked out in the sun where there was shade, but now the sun's moved, there's no more shade, and it's getting hot and hot and hot. And ambience at 48 degrees means batteries inside are at 50, 55.
Right.
You don't want to push your batteries over 60, especially NMC chemistries, you don't want to push over 60.
Yeah.
So you have a 5-degree window to start and drive. And that to drive, we don't believe in doing apologetic EVs. I mean, we are very clear whatever we give at any point of time in the day or night, you want it to deliver, it will deliver. So that day we made a call that even in this condition, if the bike had to do 105 top speed, it would do it sustained as long as the battery would allow it to, and not in terms of overheating, in terms of the charge left.
Right.
Because, I mean, the faster you go, the more energy you lose, the more range you lose. But the idea here was that we took that call, and that is how the journey of liquid cooling came out. And to be honest, liquid cooling is not rocket science. I mean, engines have been using it, radiators have existed. I mean, it's not something that's out of the blue, it's not something that's never been thought of. But just making sure that the battery and the electronics and the motor get that comfort of just something.
And a good safety margin.
It's a safety margin.
But there's a cost also, Mohal. So I want to understand, do you think it's worth that cost? And, bike also is, we know where the bike is priced. Obviously, it's priced competitively vis-a-vis, compared to the, but do you think customers will see the value in this?
You will realize that be it peak summer, winter, you want to push it, it goes.
Right.
It's never going to say, अच्छा, ये नहीं हो सकता अभी. There's no ifs and buts.
Right.
that's an unapologetic EV that we wanted to do. And to be honest, in terms of cost, I think the cost increase is about a percentage or so.
Really, that's
So
not bad. Not so
again,
much.
because radiators have existed, we are not using something fancy. It's a water glycol mix that's going in.
Right.
It's not even some fancy liquid. I mean, you could top up at any local mechanic or your local garage that you get. At the end of the day, I mean, we are Indian. We're all a bunch of Indian engineers sitting together in Ahmedabad and building this out. We have all gone through automotive troubles in our lifetimes.
Right.
Everyone has. Everyone has their fair share of stories on how they got stuck and what did they do to solve it. It's a collection of those problems which also give us solutions. I could have very well used a fancier liquid coolant just to give me that 10-15% better efficiency. But then I would have eliminated the entire ecosystem that India has in terms of accessibility and comfort and convenience.
Understood.
So we've gone simple, we've gone to first principles and said, why is something required? It needs to be justified. If it is justified, we'll go all out and solve for it. But if it is not, it just gets dropped. I mean, like for us, sound didn't have that big a value. I mean, the gearbox and the motor always make a sound because we've never heard a gearbox.
Right. Yeah.
We always hear the engine. We never hear a gearbox.
That's
So
right.
this is the first time
you're
we're
hearing
a gearbox.
Yeah, because there's no engine sound. Yeah.
Exactly. And we foiled, this is a unique enough sound that I don't need to give a
Right.
secondary audio profile. And we were completely okay and comfortable with that idea.
With the transmission whine, or so to speak, which is
exactly. And for me, I mean, when I drove it for the first time, it just gave me Star Trek vibes. There's a electric high pitch whine from the motor, and then there's a lot of metal sounds coming in, and it is a fantastic feeling.
And Mohal, just focusing more on the bike, obviously software, that's where generally startups are very strong. I even want to come later into the startup versus legacy players, how that's going. So just a little bit on, let's say, understanding the software part of it, because EVs are traditionally, in a way, computers on wheels. There's so many electronics, there's so many systems, so many parameters. But has this all been developed in-house? I mean, is that really where...
100%. Because, again, cells, magnets, semiconductors, unfortunately, we don't get these three things in India at this point in time. We are hoping very soon things will start changing. But barring that, the entire product built by us in this country, because I strongly believe, and kind of linking a few things back here, historically India has gotten technology from outside of India as far as automotive is concerned. I mean, we had the Hero Hondas and the Vespas and the Suzukis and Yamahas. Everyone's given technology in some way or form to us. Some of those bits of legacy we still see being sold today out on the road. And when you talk about electric, the journey for everyone is fresh. It's a clean slate which started with the Tesla Roadster, is how I would put it in 2010.
The start line has been redrawn in a way.
It's been redrawn. So what I'm seeing here is that all of those companies, I mean, those engines that we got from, let's say, international partners, they had been established 50 years ago.
Yeah, that's right.
They were already polished, perfected.
And engines have a long life cycle.
And those
maybe
were the
20-year
ones,
life cycles,
those were the ones which were brought into India. Now, when electric has been started only a decade ago, everyone's still solving for their home markets, everyone's still solving for different segments. Mass market India, sub $2,000, $2,500 is on nobody's mind right now. Nobody's looking at mass market EVs, especially motorcycles, or people are not looking at, I mean, we can discuss four-wheelers. I mean, we have seen what Tata has done. I think they have now 4 products in the sub
Absolutely, 4 products. They've just dominated this market. Like, it used to be Maruti was dominating the overall market. Now you just take EVs, they've gone ahead of everyone.
And if you look at the EV spectrum, how many vehicles are there below 15? And above 15 lakhs? Above 15 lakhs, we have way more than below 15, but below 15 is where the market is today. And we realize this, that nobody's going to solve the mass market problem for us. That's an India problem.
Right.
And I think we Indians are best
So that's a
suited.
huge opportunity as well.
And I feel that we understand enough technology because we've been making the same technology for people outside
Right.
in fancy R&D centers in the country. Why can't we just solve our own problems?
Right. So Paul, that's a good point. I want to touch upon the indigenous capability. Okay, one is people, talent. Seems to be quite a, that's something which is a challenge for everyone. How do you source these people? Is it about reskilling them, about training them? Do they exist? Are there people you get from the electronic sector or even software side where we are inherently strong? Because as you say, we've been sweatshops for so many people, across the world, so many companies across the world. And, again, as far as other the supply chain, still very underdeveloped from a, let's say, EV point of view. But as you said, except for the real critical components, everything is available here. Do you think these are the things which really are going to define success going forward?
So, well, I mean, I'm a very strong believer of controlling design
Right.
because that is where your edge from a product to features to, be it hardware or software. Controlling design means you know exactly what you're putting inside.
The product design, yeah.
Everything, be it the electronics, be it the suspensions,
Yeah.
be it the wheels, wheel rims, anything that goes on, you should be fully aware of what's going on. If it's a black box, that becomes a problem
Yeah.
because then you're not sure how it operates. And we are a team of 600 people today on the core R&D side, and everyone's from India.
Has it been a challenge sourcing the talent, or is it there?
It took us 4 years to kind of get everyone under the same roof, but well, it's a journey and the evolution. I don't particularly think it's a challenge. India already has the talent.
Right.
People are working for MNCs out of India. People are working in remote offices for some international companies in India. These are people who have had tremendous engineering experience solving Europe and North America's problems.
But does the innovation come out of here, quite honestly, or is it,
I think innovation's in our DNA.
right,
जुगाड़ हमें आता है.
right,
But I think it's that understanding and experience that a person has gained over the years, and then just focusing or applying it to our problem, the Indian problem. How do
right,
you make it mass
right,
market?
right, right,
Experience and innovation are not exclusive. I mean,
right.
innovation is something that we as being Indians, we just are
Naturally
good at
do.
it, naturally good at it. It's that experience on how things are working, where the technologies are moving, what's the baseline, because baselines keep getting higher and higher. That experience, coupling in the Indian context, is a win-win combination, and we have found it very easy. I would be proud to say that the team we have, I don't think there's a better team that I could have assembled in this country as far as EVs are concerned.
Yeah. Fantastic. And tell me, how do you see the supply chain developing? Because you just mentioned that, apart from the other critical components, semiconductors, rare earth materials for the magnets, and obviously the cells, which is really the secret sauce. Everything else, we've got a pretty good supply base.
We've actually got a fantastic supply base. So I think 80% of our parts come in from within Ahmedabad.
Wow.
So, well, we have the Sanand GIDC,
Right, yeah.
a bustling hub in
That's right.
automotive,
Yeah,
but everything that we want is practically available inside the country, barring some raw material, the cells, magnets, and semiconductors. I don't think the ecosystem is a problem. I don't think the skill set is a problem. It's just that scaling up has still not happened. So you don't see it as an ecosystem.
right.
Everyone knows what they have to do and how do they have to scale up. It's only a function of actually somebody saying, hey, I've arrived, I want X numbers month on month, this is what needs to be done. One person can't change the ecosystem. You need enough
Right,
people, you
right.
need that momentum building in,
So
because
it will happen, I think. There'll be a tipping.
it's inevitable. It's
Right.
inevitable.
But tell me, Amol, the critical components. Let's just talk about lithium.
Yeah.
One is as a raw material, even from a refining point of view. You know, I mean, 80% is sort of done by China. It's rare earth materials also are difficult. Do you see this as a concern? What is the way around it? How do we tackle this kind of, one thing? Because this really is the secret sauce of every EV. Frankly, it's down to lithium. Do you think there are going to be other materials? People are talking of sodium, but that's quite heavy. Do you see breakthroughs in alternate materials, happening, or will it, be kind of just trying to optimize what's available right now?
So there's lithium, there's sodium, there are metal layers, there are even some radioactive batteries, nuclear batteries that have been put up. As far as automotive is concerned, lithium is king and it's going to stay king.
It's the lightest material right now. So
And there
lightest
are
element.
efficiency improvements which are happening, but they are incremental in nature. Fundamental physics is not going to change. I mean, your periodic table is not going to change. The way materials work is not going to change. Those are the universal laws. So, where I see this transition happening is India is in a way securing some mining rights in Argentina. We are looking at exploring our own mines in Kashmir. But the one good thing about lithium is, unlike importing petrol and diesel, it doesn't go up in smoke.
Yeah.
Whatever lithium that is coming into the country today is going to be serviced by the recycling industry and it's going to keep staying in the country. So that's just one, I mean, it's a perspective shift that we import so much oil and we just make smoke out of it.
Right.
When we're importing lithium ion batteries, they actually stay with us.
But that's coming to the recyclability part about EVs and the circularity and all. I mean, that's also still a challenge, isn't it? I mean, extracting it, end of life, the batteries.
It is. I mean, there are some chemistries which are way more difficult to extract from than others. But I think for the first mass of batteries to come down to recycling, we have a few years ahead of us. I mean, I'd say 2021, 22 is when the real boom in EVs have happened, especially on the scooter side.
Right.
And I think if all goes well, I think 2028, 29 is when you would see the first major bulk of batteries coming in. I think by then there'll be a lot more progress that's happened, even from a mining perspective, out on foreign shores, mining inside, and recycling as an industry maturing up. Because Europe and North America have to solve this problem way before us.
Right.
Because they have had electrics now a decade in. So they need to solve recycling. And recycling, once solved by somebody, then it's just a function of just, getting all the processes right.
But it's very interesting you're saying lithium is eventually, I mean, that is going to be the fuel of the future in some ways, and for the foreseeable future, and we've just got to make the most of securing
I have a very simple opinion that we are not going to be a one, what can I say, fuel economy anymore. So there'll be lithium which is going to be used for two-wheelers, three-wheelers, cars. Buses and trucks might
sodium for heavier applications.
Buses and trucks might not even have batteries. It could be hydrogen, it could be alternate fuels. So we are no longer going to be limited by what works from a industry overall. I mean, it's not going to be who has the highest number of fuel stations.
Yeah, there's still no one silver bullet that way.
And which is better because then you're not risking yourself
on one technology,
or one thing. I mean, we were heavily dependent on petrol and diesel. Then we found CNG and we have been evolving. It's actually an evolution that started and it's just going to keep amplifying itself.
Right. And Mohal, I want to switch to talking about startups. You're up against a lot of legacy players. Today, TVS is really on the scooter space, has done fairly well. Bajaj also, but clearly the sense one gets is these guys have got a very light foot on the gas because in the EV space, clearly their, let's say, main business comes from the ICE portfolio. But do you think, not being a legacy player has some disadvantages in terms of the non-EV bits of the business where the legacy players have decades of experience, and overall the whole manufacturing and supply chain management and things like that. Yeah. And where do you think you can be, let's say, have an edge? Obviously, being more nimble is one of them.
No, I think for me, the benefits of not being an auto guy at all are far greater than had I been an auto guy. And the reason is that today these vehicles are more semiconductor than metal.
Right.
I mean, there's no engine blocks, there's no metal working, there's your casting processes have come down. I mean, you're spending more time trying to figure out what that small green silicon board does and how does it
Right.
operate. So you're actually thinking more from a smartphone on wheels concept rather than wheels which are electric. So that mindset alone, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I even thought that it is possible to introduce a fantastic touchscreen and infotainment module onto a motorcycle.
Right.
I mean, the simple thought that, hey, everything's running on a PCB. There's very little of what originally a motorcycle is. I mean, yes, you have the frame and you have the suspensions and the wheels. But when it comes to now batteries or electronics or the motors or the way your wiring harnesses are, I mean, historically motorcycles ran on minimal wiring harness. They still
Right.
run on them.
Right.
And now I have some 900 meters of cables going across the board.
Wow.
It's a lot of cables everywhere.
Right.
Now suddenly you're thinking, okay, this is no longer a motorcycle where the engine was the core and you built around. Now it's suddenly all electronics, which you're really propping them on wheels and driving them around. So that is where I think the ability to control your software, the ability to control your hardware, because at the end of the day, and this is something that has happened to a lot of people in the US, that tier ones ended up making more money than the OEMs because the OEMs had no ability to control their
Right.
software and hardware.
Right.
And that is where I think we have a clear advantage because at the end of the day, making money is the end objective. I mean, we are in a
Yeah, that's
capitalist
right.
society, so
Yeah,
we're here to do a business. So
And this is a very capital intensive business. You have to have the right
exactly.
margins.
And I don't believe that just burning through cash is the way to survive in this.
Right.
I don't think the Indian consumer is that gullible. I think we are very smart. We know exactly what we want.
That's interesting, but I want to ask you, the general view is that EVs right now, despite, taxation benefits, fiscal benefits, just the cost of the batteries, etc., EVs mean little or no profits or even a lot of cash burn. I mean, how is your business model, kind of, let's say, structured?
So, so for us, we were trying to solve for three things, and three things that we believe are really stopping mass adoption. It's the upfront cost,
Yeah.
the performance, and the reliability. Now,
Not charging infra.
no, and
That's interesting. Or range. Well,
no,
performance is range in a way, but you're saying
but
charging infra.
performance for us more like ये fly or chutney चाहिए.
Right.
When two people are sitting, it should not really struggle
Correct.
to go up a flyover. We're talking
Right.
about core. I mean, and performance for us meant ki range to a certain extent because when you're really, really talking two-wheelers, and this is the part I think that gets missed upon most is two-wheelers can get charged off a regular 5 amp socket, your
That's right.
bedside socket, where
Yeah,
you're
that's
charging your
right.
phone from.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Not
don't
even
need
not even
infrastructure.
15 amp.
Not even 15 amp,
5
5
amp
amp.
socket. Yeah.
That means that the infrastructure is already in place.
Right. Right. Yeah.
We have to start thinking in that sense. The infrastructure is already there.
It's not like a car.
Yeah, I mean, you have more than enough sockets in this room out
Yeah,
here
yeah.
where I could charge it.
Right.
So, a car needs minimum 15 amp and then 7 kilowatt, 11 kilowatt, or whatever you want to end up installing.
right.
Two-wheelers.
And the batteries are much smaller, so even if it's a slow charge, you'll get it.
So, the era, even at the worst case, you're about 5 odd hours. So,
Right. On a what, 2.23 kilowatt charge.
1 kilowatt charge, 1 point odd,
Right.
1 point something. So, because our battery is only 5 kilowatt in its total capacity. So
Right.
1 point something kilowatt, 5 hours, you will go from 0 to
That's
100.
interesting. So range, I mean, in charging infra for bikes.
Charging infra is not a concern, but when you talk about upfront cost, performance, and reliability was very clear, and I think that's where the liquid cooling comes in. That's where our choice of vendors and the way we have designed it, tested it, spent years trying to break it. I mean, all of that counts. But the upfront cost is something that I think I can talk a bit more on.
Yeah.
When we look at the market, we are looking at about between the 150 to 200 cc, because I can't really equate an EV to an internal combustion. My torque is always going to be better, but my top speed might not. So it's not an apples to apples comparison. But when I talk about the 150 to 200 cc segment, of late the prices have gone up significantly. I mean, we are talking on an average of between 1.5 lakhs to 1 lakh 80,000.
And driven largely by emissions also, emission regulations.
Emission regulations, we have had the BS6 coming in. So a lot of things have contributed to this. And on top of it, even there's been a natural thrust in the market of people moving from 100 to the 125 cc segments, because now that's the largest growing segment. I mean, India is a very aspirational country.
That's interesting. So you see the delta between ICE and EVs coming, the gap reducing with all these factors.
So again, between 1 lakh 50 and 1 lakh 80 or 85 is where we see the internal combustion market. Obviously, there'll be a few exceptions. There'll be some high performance vehicles which are available for cheap and vice versa. But mass of what is being sold sits at this price point. That's where we are very clear that we wanted to be in the segment. So that's where you look at the era, our ex-showroom prices are 174 and 184. We believe that 5% above average or 10% above average is acceptable, because we have a lot more features coming in, and that's something we can ask.
Right.
But had I positioned this at something like 2.4 lakhs, that wouldn't have worked, because that's counter to what we believe.
But at this price, I mean, are you, I mean, if I can push you, I mean, is there a margin at this price, or is it still at a kind of,
There is a margin, and one of the reasons that margin exists is because we design and control everything. We don't pay people for IP.
Right. So that's what one of the areas.
We don't pay a lot of money out for somebody else's engineering.
Right.
And that is where in the world of EVs, a lot of money gets lost.
Right.
So
yeah, no, that's interesting. And just coming again back to the overall pricing, and clearly fiscal benefits are there.
Yep.
There have been issues with FAME, as you know, and GST also kind of allows you to price it in this. I mean, going ahead, do you think you'll reach a point where you don't need all these subsidies, and correctly subsidies are likely to be withdrawn in, let's say, the next couple of years?
So I've been a strong proponent of subsidies not being a crutch. They are supposed to be
an enabler.
They're not supposed to be a crutch. Your business model cannot depend upon subsidies to survive. Your subsidies are there as a stimulus to the industry. But at the end of the day, I think in India, with the scale of the market that we have, I mean, we are 1.5 billion people. There are close to 100 million people in the next 10 years who will be coming into the working age population. That means 100 million will need some mode of transport. I think scale is so high that if planned properly, subsidies, yes, I would only, I mean, I've been consistent in my ask as well that the 2 years we lost because of the pandemic, 2020 and 2021, because pandemic and then chip shortages.
Right.
That is something, if the government could consider extending, that's the best, and that's a maximum I would actually ever end up asking.
Right. So that's interesting. What you're saying is, eventually, when you all ramp up and with huge scale, you can save costs there to compensate for the...
yes, and eventually what will happen is cost of fuel will keep going up.
Yeah.
I mean, a limited resource on consuming it is not going to ever get cheaper. It's going to keep going up and
Emission
up.
Regulations will keep getting tighter.
Emission regulations will keep getting tighter. most countries will start feeling the pressure of the commitments they have made to net zero.
Right.
They might not feel it today, but
Right.
they will feel it. I mean, India is already walking that path. We are
Right.
way ahead in terms of what we have done.
Right.
And I think with fantastic policy, we will keep doing it and we might become world ahead of our times. I mean, we might be the
Right.
shining light saying this is how to get it done. But overall, I think across the world, this is going to happen. And across the world, people are going to see the pressure to really move away to something cleaner. I'm not saying it will be battery operated electric vehicles. People might have hydrogen some places. People,
There'll be zero emission from that
yes.
point.
And what will happen is in some areas, extreme cases, you will still have pockets of petrol and diesel
Nice,
because
yeah.
they might not have those
Right.
options of
So one
fuel.
thing good, I mean, in a way, India hasn't given an end date to the ICE engine the way Europe has or other markets have. So I think we will see a longish transition.
I think in India, putting an end date doesn't make sense.
Right.
I really don't think an end date makes sense in India because being very practical, we have run all kinds of fuel at the end of the day, and with so many mouths that actually need to be, I mean, fed per se in terms of mobility needs.
Exactly. I mean, affordability becomes an issue across
Yes,
strata.
and that is where you will always have the full spectrum coming in. I mean,
Right.
there'll be ideas of swapping batteries and finding cost points there. There'll
Right.
be fixed battery packs. There'll be hydrogen. There'll be sodium. There'll be hybrids in leasing and financing. We are creative enough to figure out a way to make everyone comfortable.
Right.
And I think in that mix, saying that petrol needs a deadline, I think just by economies, petrol will find its own niche eventually.
Right.
Small area
To
where it'll have
exist.
to sit. Yeah.
Right. Fantastic. Well, this is the last question. I want your outlook on the, you know, two-wheeler EV market. Scooters, pretty high penetration right now. I think it's about 5% or if I'm not mistaken. And, motorbikes much less. But overall, how do you see the market panning out in the next, by the end of the decade?
I think the government set out targets at about 30 odd percent overall electrification. I think the revised numbers on two wheelers might have been much higher than that.
Yeah.
But I think India is a motorcycling country. And I believe India is a motorcycling country not because India has, I mean, it's not because people travel a lot on large distances. It's just that India loves its SUVs. And motorcycles are the SUVs of the two-wheeler world. So, in that sense, we have always driven on motorcycles since they were introduced in the mid 90s or the early 90s. And I think motorcycles electric have been a market which is significantly underserved.
Yeah.
There is a supply gap which is a problem so acute that I mean I can't even describe the pent up demand that is there in the market today. I mean, I've heard motorcyclists moving towards electric scooters because they wanted to and had no option.
Right.
I mean, I've rarely heard a motorcyclist move to a scooter. I mean, that
Right.
just does not make sense. But I've seen this happen, I've heard this happen, and once unlocked, I think this electrification number on scooters will go up because scooters and motorcycles are not a competing entity.
Right. Yeah.
It's a function of coexisting.
And very different use case situations.
So, as scooters have come up, there has become pent up demand for motorcycles. As motorcycles start becoming available, the conversation around electric will really amplify, and then scooters will go higher and motorcycles, and then it's two to tango kind of thing just to get to that penetration.
But what is your, what do you think? Do you think in time with, as you said, with proper supply, proper choice, more players in the EV motorbike market, I mean, there are very few right now like yourselves. Do you think in terms of numbers, motorbikes and scooters could be similar? Because electrification right now appears to be lending itself to scooters better for these very small intercity commutes, packaging, all that sort of thing.
I think that's because they are the only ones available.
Right. You think it's really a function there's not enough choice in the
There's actually no choice. You know this better than most. I mean,
yeah, that's right. Absolutely.
you know this better than most. That there are no electric motorcycles. There's not enough options. I mean, in scooters, I can go through your website and I'll go through pages and pages in terms of variants and offers.
And all the low speed stuff as well.
Everything, right? And when I look at motorcycles, I mean, I don't think I get through more than three lines or 4 lines. That's where it ends.
Right.
So I think I would still believe that the market is not gonna. I think the market's gonna stay in terms of ratios where it is.
Right.
Motorcycles to scooters, and it's gonna be purely a function of time where motorcycles are just a late entrant to the party.
Right.
That's the way to look at it.
And last question, Mohal, Matter's point of view. What can we expect in the future? Can you share a bit on the product side? What you know?
So
obviously
I definitely. So we positively believe that 100 to 200 cc is what needs solving in this country.
Right.
So we've started with the era which we are putting in the 150 200 cc bracket, which is a plug-in only, and you'll see a few variants, in terms of battery sizes and in terms of performance across this vehicle. But our next big focus, big platform that we're working on is the 150 and below.
Right.
And that's where it's swap in and plug in.
So you'll have some swappable solution.
Yes, because I strongly believe that if I could offer a 1 lakh rupee bike with the battery and 70,000 or 65,000 without, that's something that's going to become a very interesting proposition because bringing down price point, and that's what I said, it's a function of financing, it's a function of all of these things. How do we mix and match it to really, really drive adoption? Because our core idea is solving for upfront costs, performance, and reliability, and we will stick to these three things. I mean, this is what. It's very boring. It's not sexy. It's not fancy. The fanciness we are kind of giving in terms of features on the product, but we really want to solve basic things first.
Right.
I think those are the ones which have been overlooked, which have been missed, and that's why consumers at some point really didn't trust this industry.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
And I think the first point is to build that trust with the consumer, saying, "Jo dikhta hai wo milta hai."
Right.
Then we are okay to play with the world in terms of fanciness.
Well, Lalbhai, real pleasure talking to you.
Thanks you so
very
much.
Wish you all the best. It's a really exciting journey. I think everyone knows that electric mobility, that is the way forward. How fast it happens, again, a lot of variables over there. But with companies like Matter really taking a lead in innovation and looking at multiple segments, especially in the motorbike space, I think the future is very exciting. Thanks again for talking to us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.